join us. We have already still a few minutes for any questions. Thank you very much to all of you for your very, very exciting presentations. Any questions from you?
I have two questions for Professor Rune Nilsson. One question is about this map on your slide. There were a map of the Europe. I'm from Poland, and I'm asking about this blue color. What does it mean? And the second question is about the assessment in these specialized memory clinics. This second language, as I'm a neuropsychologist, is in English, for example, in Paris, or this is the language of the persons with mild cognitive impairment who are patients of these clinics. Thank you.
So thank you very much for those two questions. So I think, as I heard it, the first question concerned the color on the map. So there are two different blue colors, as I recall it, and the blue color are the sites that have responded to both the first and the second survey. So, and then there was a light blue, I think, and they responded only to the first survey. And there was a green color, and that was sites that were new in the second survey. It's a bit hard to see here, but I hope that answered your question. And the second question was the language of assessment. So all the different countries translated the screening instruments to the majority language in the country. And then they assessed participants in the preferred language, pretty much, with an interpreter when that was available. But as I also showed you, I assessed that in the statistics, whether assessment was performed in the first or second language. And when it was first language, it was usually with an interpreter present, but never in English, unless it was in the UK.
More questions? More speakers?
I had another question. It's for June. In your quick version of the test that you described, are you concerned that you may be just picking up people later in their disease as opposed to picking up memory loss early when you use the memory component?
Thank you very much for that question. So currently we're actually designing a study on the basic and the basic Q, where we want to follow the trajectory of cognitive impairment from initial stages to more severe stages, because that's really important in the GP setting to monitor the patients. So we haven't collected data on that yet, but that's a plan for the future. What we have done is to compare scores on the basic and basic Q with the level of dementia, so MCI, mild, moderate, severe dementia. And here we see a very high correlation. And actually the correlation between the basic and a clinical evaluation of degree of cognitive impairment is higher compared to the MMSE. So it seems to work quite well for monitoring as well.
Thank you. One question from Jean-Georges. Two?
I would actually have a question to Antonella. And I think the focus that you had was very much on research in clinical research, basic research. And I'm just wondering, when you look at psychosocial research, and if I look at our conference, I really have the feeling that the future of dementia research is female, because a lot of the researchers that we have here are women. And I'm just wondering whether you see the same biases in psychosocial research that you have seen in clinical research.
I will say, first of all, that I hope that the future of this planet is female. But that's, you know, my personal wish. And it speaks for those differences that are existing in neuroscience. And we know how our brain might wire in a different direction than the male one. Look at the wars which are happening, and there I pose. About your question on how the future of research is looking like based on our evidences and our understanding, is that certainly we have an increase of female leading both clinical research as well as societal type of research. Whether there is a continuity then of this leadership retained within the system, I'm not sure. We are not there yet, meaning that lots of researchers are conducting research themselves as women, but then when it's got the hierarchical scale, let's say, or they have to climb the ladder, excuse me, then they get lost. I think I mentioned also how important this is by showing the data that we're addressing how the sex of the individual performing a test in a clinical trial for Alzheimer's disease, like the CDR sum of boxes, might have an influence on the readout. So I think that this has to be, rather than corrected, considered, meaning we have to consider those differences, take them into the account of how we design the trial, also in, of course, psychosocial research. We know that caregiving is female, for example, how this has an impact on the patient management and the data we generate. So I hope I answered it. It's a very broad question, and I think the problem is really large, but I really hope that we are going to learn and fix accordingly.
Thank you very much. One final question, or is it time to our coffee break? Okay.
Please.
Is there?
I'd like.
Okay.
I'm French, so I'm trying to speak English. Sorry. Thanks to all of you, it was really interesting. I learned many things. I just don't understand why a conference like that takes place in the last day and so early in the morning. And I wanted to know, each of you, do you notice a better consideration the last years for the question you're working on? Is there a better consideration for all these questions, gender, LGBT, Down syndrome, in the research?
And the question goes to?
I can maybe try to give an answer from my perspective. I think that we see obviously that the topic of sex and gender impacting Alzheimer's disease has picked up exponentially. And actually, yesterday I learned something very nice, a quote of a colleague who said, either you're on the menu or you are on the, what was it, menu or at the table or at the menu. At the moment we are on the menu. Before we were at the table, now we're on the menu, because everybody speaks about sex and gender differences. And I'm very happy to see this, because it means that the change is happening everywhere. And at least this is what I can witness. I see a predominance of the people in the room being women. I counted them. I think we are 140. Now, some people arrived late. When I counted, it was 140 female and 40 men. What does it mean? I don't know. All I know is that such type of topics are certainly more close to the female population. It resonates more with us, diversity, the inclusion, because we have been discriminated for centuries, decades, in the history of this planet. So, and I think the same it is for the LGBT community. I think the same goes for Down syndrome patients, for minorities. I think, you know, it's time to stand up collectively and make the change.
Yeah, And I fully agree. So I've been doing research on minority ethnic groups for almost 15 years now. And when I started out, my colleagues would just shrug their shoulders and say, why? And today it's part of everyday life. And as you see at this conference, it's a main theme for many of the sessions. And thank you very much for Alzheimer Europe to put this on the agenda for several years now. But I'm a neuropsychologist, and the last 2 or 3 neuropsychology conferences across the world has aimed so much at cross-cultural differences, because the world is changing. And especially the global south, more and more researchers are looking into dementia, looking into cognition, and they're struggling because they are trying to take down tools from the shelf that just don't work in that context. And that'll be the same for the other presenters here, I think. But there's increasing awareness and an increasing need. So I think the world is becoming more and more diverse, and we recognize that, also in research.
Ima, do you want to add?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just to say, I absolutely agree with both of you, and I was very heartened to see that I think there is more representation of intellectual disability and Down syndrome. And I think in general there is a growing awareness around the importance and the need to include people with Down syndrome. And I think that's both from a scientific perspective, so what we know around the trajectory of biomarkers and how much we can learn from people with Down syndrome, and also really importantly from an equity perspective, that this is an underserved population and that we need to ensure that they are included, that there isn't added or compounded inequities. So yeah, I think I can see that growing awareness.
Thank you, Emer. And to finish, please, John.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone else as well that it's a collective responsibility to ensure everyone's voices are heard, because it's like in the UK, homosexuality was still seen as a mental health issue until the 70s. And change is happening, and with any change, it does take, well, I call them small steps, but sometimes the smaller steps are better, and the more you get, the more smaller steps you've done. And we should all be standing up for everyone.
Thank you very much to all of you.